Ukraine is preparing a new counterattack, but what does this mean, and will it change the course of the war? Well, we don't know until they launch it, and that's something that only a few people in Kiev know, when it's going to be, where it will be, and quite what it will consist of. Almost certainly, it is some sort of armoured attack with heavily armoured forces to punch through some part of the Russian occupied areas of Ukraine, which are that semicircle from the Donbass round through to the area of Mykolaiv in the southwest. And the purpose, we think, of that is probably that the Ukrainians will punch southwards if they can in order to threaten Crimea. They probably can't take Crimea, but they can put themselves in a position to threaten Crimea. And if they do that, then they have got something politically to bargain with against the Kremlin sometime in the later summer or the autumn. But we don't know, we're only guessing. We will see when we see what the Ukrainians have decided to do with the forces which are now building up. This counteroffensive is really important because it's there to convince both the West and Ukraine's own population that they can win this war in some meaningful sense. The Ukrainians have not just got to do well in this offensive. I'm sure they'll do well anyway, but they've got somehow to be decisive. They've got to be able to change the balance of forces on the battlefield, and the Western world that is supporting Ukraine have got to feel that therefore the Ukrainians now might be able to win. They might be able to throw the Russians out of their territory over the next year or 2 years. If it looks as if they won't be able to do that, if it looks as if this war will just go on, surging one way and then the other, then the view is that the Western world will very quickly get fatigued by Ukraine and won't be prepared to support Kiev in its aims of throwing the Russians out of the territory that they've conquered. So this offensive is politically very important because it has to convince the West that the Ukrainians can't just do well, but actually win in some significant way. That's a pretty big ask when you look at the way the forces are lining up. The question of Russian response is quite an interesting one. So far, the Russians have pulled back a little bit from the tempo of operations.
Если не будет боеприпасов, то мы уйдем с позиций и зададим вопрос, все-таки кто Родине изменяет? Видимо, тот, кто подписывал.
They're restricting their use of ammunition, not because they don't have it, but because they're saving it. And I'm pretty sure they're holding back quite a lot of their own heavy metals, some of their own armour. They're waiting to see what the Ukrainians will do. And so we've seen the tempo of operations pause a little bit in the last 2 or 3 weeks. The Russians are holding back, like the rest of us, waiting to see what the Ukrainians will do. And when they see what the Ukrainians will do, then we'll see how the Russians will respond. But they will respond, and they will respond, I think, fairly vigorously. In a sense, the West is behind all of it. The Ukrainians are determined to do this, and they're confident that they can achieve something significant, even decisive. But they can't do it without Western equipment. And so what the West has done is provide at least 200, maybe 250 really good main battle tanks. Leopard 1s, Leopard 2s, Challenger tanks. American Abrams tanks are on their way. The French, the AMX-10, that's another tank-busting system. And if you look at what the West has given Ukraine, it isn't just tanks and armoured vehicles. It's aircraft, it's helicopters, it's recovery vehicles, maintenance stuff, pontoon bridges, lots and lots of material, anti-aircraft defences, missiles. They've given them something of the whole range of modern warfare. If the Ukrainians are able to use it properly, in an integrated way, it's known as combined arms operations. If they're able to conduct combined arms operations at a very big level, which is what they'll have to do, then that equipment will really make a potential difference. Because their equipment now is there in numbers, and it is a great deal better than the Russian equipment that they're up against.